Austin, Ben is in the public meeting. If you can.
Yeah, and I see Jaja is as well.
Okay. Let's see if we can work on that for next meeting, please. Hi, everyone, welcome. We're just taking a moment to pull our board members into the meeting.
Jaja's declined to be a panelist at this time, so.
Jaja, if you can hear, Austin's gonna resend that. And if you can accept, that'd be fantastic. Well, while we're waiting to get Jaja in, Austin originally reminded me that it's COVID and flu vaccination season. So, you know, for those of you who haven't gotten your flu shot and your COVID booster, now's the time. Actually, Austin, why don't we just go ahead and keep moving forward? And if you want to keep working on trying to get Jaja in, that would be great.
Yes, Taj and I currently keeps declining the invite up, so we can get going.
And if anybody has his phone, if we can just text her real quick. All right. Well, welcome everyone. I now call this regular meeting of the KCRHA Implementation Board to order. We start by grounding our work in our theory of change, which is that if we create a homeless response system that centers people with lived experience, then we'll be able to focus on responding to needs and eliminating inequities in order to end homelessness for all. This is a hybrid meeting, as all of our meetings will be going forward. So there's a physical location as well as virtual access. I want to thank the Mayor of Seattle, Bruce Harrell, for allowing us to host the in-person location at Seattle City Hall. Before we jump into our roll call, I just want to take a moment and say welcome to two new board members. Jaja Floyd is stepping in to replace Sarah Rankin, and Marvin Futrell has been confirmed as an alternate. And we are really grateful to have them here with us today. Austin, if you would like to go ahead and call that roll call with our new member.
Hello. Awesome, everybody. Member Anderson? Member Caminos? Member Carvalho? Member Shelmanak?
Here.
Member Merritt?
Here.
Member McHenry Jr.? Member Pat Now?
Here.
Chair Reddy?
Here.
Member Ross?
Here.
Member Spotted Oak?
Present.
Member Floyd? Member Brandon? Marvin, are you filling in for Member Brandon? You're on mute.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. The clerk reports 7 people present. Chair, we do have quorum.
Thank you, Clerk. We acknowledge, and I would like to also take a moment to do our land acknowledgement and acknowledge that King County is located on the unceded traditional land of the Coast Salish peoples. We honor this land, its peoples, past and present, and we're committed to directing funding and resources to organizations led by and in support of Native and Indigenous people. So at every meeting, we also reserve time for public comment. If you'd like to provide comments, please raise your hand in Zoom or sign up with Austin in person if you're there at City Hall, and Austin will call on you in the order received after the CEO update. We've heard your feedback and have also increased our time to 1 minute and 30 seconds from just a minute. I think the minute was a little too short for folks last time. Next on our agenda, we were scheduled to approve our minutes from the October 2023 implementation board meeting, but I apologize to the board, we don't have those available right this moment. So we will be considering those in our December meeting. So to the public, if you would like to go ahead and start raising your hand, and in the meantime, Helen, if you'd like to provide us with our CEO update, I'm glad to have you.
Good afternoon. Nice to see all of you. I am pleased to report that we're making good progress on our top priorities of improving the internal workings of the agency. And I'm feeling confident that we'll be able to set up the new and permanent CEO, set them up for success. With regard to the CEO search, I had a chance to meet with the search firm a few weeks ago, and they've started their listening sessions with members of the KCRHA team and our community to gather information on what qualifications and experience would be best suited to this position. We expect to have a more comprehensive update on the timeline at the next convening of the CEO Search Advisory Committee, which I believe is tomorrow. I really want to thank the advisory committee members for their engagement. Their work is critical to ensure the long-term success of KCRHA. I'd also like to report that we had our first severe weather activation for this season, the weekend of October 27th through 29th, in response to overnight freezing temperatures. We partnered successfully with the Urban League, Salvation Army, and the YWCA to provide shelter for 69 homeless single adult men and women, as well as 24 families. Highlights to the joint response included the Salvation Army expanding its capacity at the Sotos shelter by adding 30 beds during the activation period. They served 60 individuals there over the course of the activation. Urban League staff assisted the West Seattle Cold Weather Shelter, which 31 participants utilized, and the YWCA received 24 referrals from the Mary's Place intake line. It was a good opportunity for us to check our protocols and refine how we work before we run into a much bigger winter storm. Also, as we head into winter, we're engaging in planning for the unsheltered point-in-time count to be conducted at the end of January. HUD has approved KCRHA using the same respondent-driven sampling methodology that we used in 2022, but this go-round will be focused just on questions required by HUD, and we won't be doing the including any additional qualitative information this time. You may recall that KCRHA partnered with researchers at the University of Washington to develop the methodology, and I hope you're able to review the letter from the University of Washington Center for Studies in Demography and Ecology about it. Our Chief Community Impact Officer, Owen Capitz, will brief you in a lot more detail about the pit count planning later in the meeting. And of course, we'll keep you updated as we get closer to the actual count in January. I also want to take a moment to address questions around the large number of asylum seekers at Riverton Park Church in Tukwila. As you may know, many of these asylum seekers are families with children. There are a number of pregnant women, and right now, most of them are all living outside. KCRHA staff had visited the church to assess the situation so that we can make appropriate recommendations. We're working with government partners at all levels, including the state and the county, to seek a solution. And the state is now leading this effort. The authority has offered up expertise on rapid rehousing, including guidance on cost modeling based on local expertise and program costs in terms of what it would take to quickly get the program stood up. And coordination, we coordinated with Share Tent City 3 to assist with the weatherization of the tents. As we hear of additional needs from partners, we'll be sure to keep our governing boards updated. We want to ensure we're being responsive and playing an appropriate role. Basically, we recognize that the homeless response system is already stretched thin, and the need for both a state and federal solution here is clear. KCRHA sees our role as one of support and expertise as a bridge to a longer-term strategy. But the call for humanitarian aid and the challenge of finding safe shelter and housing for approximately 300 new people really highlights the need for regional collaboration across cities, as well as collaboration with state and federal partners. I will say that I'm very hopeful, optimistic that we are nearing a time where a significant proposal will be shared soon about a proposed solution. It's not my news to share, and it's not quite ready for prime time yet, but I am very hopeful that we're going to see significant movement here. Finally, I also want to recognize our federal partners for their strong support of the authority. We welcomed HUD Deputy Assistant Secretary Jameen Bryan for a visit on Tuesday, October 24th. And we had a chance to talk through some of our progress and challenges as a young agency. As always, we appreciate the opportunity to talk directly and frankly with our federal partners. And so we enjoyed our time with Jameen. And with that, those are the updates that I have for you right now. I look forward to our meeting again early next month. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Howell.
There's Jaja.
Austin, if you can acknowledge to Member Floyd joined us.
Jaja
Jaja,
recognizes. Hi, Jaja.
Hello.
Jaja.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to open up to the board for questions for CEO Howell. Ellen, actually, oh, sorry, Jaja, please.
Yeah, Helen, you said you had a meeting with Janine from HUD. Did they talk about vouchers or anything possibly coming our way? Vouchers? Giving us more vouchers our way? Did they talk about?
They have not, but they,
Okay.
have, she did mention some funding opportunities that will be upcoming. As you know, we don't, as far as the EHVs, we are unclear whether more are going to be coming out, but we do know that some regions have underutilized them. So there's still hope there, but otherwise, those are the only vouchers that have, come our way. Otherwise, we work with the housing authorities, King County Housing Authority and Seattle Housing Authority in terms of trying to do that work and getting them to support folks who are currently living unsheltered.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Member Moritz? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Sorry, thanks Emma, thanks Helen. On the same topic of HUD, have we received feedback on the unsheltered homelessness NOFA that we were excluded from last year as to why, and do we anticipate there'll be a similar opportunity to try and get that kind of federal funding this year? And, do we have a plan in place to make sure that our applications score sufficiently high this time around?
Well, I think that Peter Lynn reported on this, but maybe I'm not recalling that correctly. Our NOFA was submitted on time, and we applied for all available funding, and in fact did not receive enough applications the first go round and reopened so that we wouldn't leave anything sitting on the table. As far as last year's briefing, there was a debrief with HUD, we just didn't do as well as we might have. I do know that we had some staffing shortages, and we're about 1 deep. So sometimes that has an impact. But I believe that the advisory committee had a good process and felt good about the NOFO process this year, and it seems to have gone well. And that's what Peter's been reporting. He's actually out this week, but I wanted to share that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't recall hearing the post-mortem on last year's allocation. It does, we, as the region that has the highest incidence of unsheltered homelessness probably in the entire Western world, you'd think that we would be top of the list for unsheltered homelessness funding. So I would love to figure out what can we as an implementation board do to support our region's application and make sure that we knock it out of the park this year, both in terms of getting the applications in that we need to be and go and make our application to HUD. But that I can't think of a better funding source than free money from the federal government. So would love to try and make that successful in any way we can.
Yeah, I think we've done our best this year to try to go for all available funding. And so we'll see the results.
Excellent.
Helen, I had one question for you, a follow-up to Member Floyd's question. That EHV program was probably one of our most successful programs, and I think HUD was really kind of pointing to it as an example for the EHVs. Even if we are not getting new emergency housing vouchers, are there lessons from that we can use in our other housing vouchers, like the traditional ones being administered through King County Housing Authority, Seattle Housing Authority, Renton Housing Authority?
It's a little bit more difficult. What HUD did is require partnership. There was no way to do it but with your COC. So it was required by HUD that it be a partnership. And I think that the housing authorities are accustomed to operating in this arena kind of by themselves. But it was a true partnership in that and a new approach. I think I cannot recall the exact number, but there were a large number of organizations that worked with us that had not traditionally received any funding from our organization. So a lot of community-based organizations, and that was what was new and innovative about it. And our community capacity folks are definitely in a position to help, and that's the work they do, try to help smaller organizations put themselves in a position to be able to compete for dollars when we do have competitive processes for funding. So I think that was one of the real innovations, but it also came from HUD, it came from on high. And I think that requirement forced it. And as a result of the requirement, it turned into a really positive and healthy working relationship. And some of us were a little nervous early on. Were we going to use all of the vouchers, and were people going to get housed? But over time, we're now recognized as one of the best programs in the country at that particular, in that particular arena.
Thanks, Ellen.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions for our CEO? Thank you for that update.
Okay, thank you.
We now have 15 minutes for public comment. So if you wish to comment and you haven't already raised your hand or signed up in person, please do so now. Each person will have a minute and a half to comment, and we ask that the comments be related to today's agenda. Start with the people on Zoom and then move to the people in the room if there are any. Public comment is now open. Austin, please call on people.
Awesome. Well, there's nobody here in Seattle City Hall other than myself. But the first one up on Zoom is gonna be Michelle Eastman. Michelle, you've been given permission to talk. If you want to unmute, test your mic, and then your 1 minute and 30 seconds will begin after after you speak.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Michelle.
Wonderful. All right. So hi, my name is Michelle Eastman. I'm the Director of Communications for the Lived Experience Coalition. I want to take a moment to thank Ellen Gutierrez for work on the severe weather, given that Alan came in such a short time ago. I also want to recognize, though, that this is severe weather season and that there is so much more work to be done to make sure our unhoused neighbors do not die in the cold. To that end, I want to repeat the ask of the Lived Experience Coalition to provide a map of the areas that are currently being served so the broader community can see what is needed and the Lived Experience Coalition can better assist in and advocate for expanded response. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Next up we have is Bill Curlin-Hackett. Bill, you're given permission to speak. If you want to unmute, test your mic, and then your 1 minute and 30 seconds to start after that.
Thank you. Members of the implementation board, I really didn't plan on talking today, but I was in Seattle today, making some arrangements with a colleague at REACH about vehicle residency work group, which we've presented before and have received some validation that we exist. But every time we come to a meeting, everything changes. And one of the things that changed is that there's now a temporary RV lot down East Marginal that's taking RVs from the Green River Sweep, which is between Kent and Auburn. These are folks who are supposed to be there for 3 days, and then they have to move. Salvation Army is supposedly providing outreach. None of that went through the vehicle resident work group for consideration, recommendations, or even partnerships. We've got different organizations doing the right of way from the state funding, outreach to vehicles, and yet we were told Monday that they're doing outreach all over the place. Well, we don't think that's true. Part of what I'm trying to say here, and I'm apologizing because I didn't write any of this down off the top of my head, is that we're not as organized as we need to be as part of the KCRHA vehicle residency recommendations or anything else. We've been split into regions by the city of Seattle and then by the RHA funding. Clients who were under one case manager now are not under that case manager anymore. I wish we would have a summit. Maybe the implementation board could arrange that so that we would all get the partners in the room with RHA and we can sort this out. It is not the way it needs to be right now. So thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Next up I have is Adam Rice. Adam, if you would like to unmute, test your mic, and then your 1 minute, 30 seconds will start after that.
Can you hear me?
I can, Adam.
Thank you. Look, I was asked to come here and lay something out to you today. As a former systems advocate, with the dissolution of our team, we have left a lot of our partnership for zero clients in the lurch. Now, our right-of-way clients, and I say our right-of-way clients, because if they went into rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing, it was Partnership for Zero funds, i.e. us, that put them in there, have had their rapid rehousing extended. We need our Partnership for Zero people to have their rapid rehousing extended, especially since our team has been cut off. And the 5 that remain have a caseload of 50 people apiece to stabilize, which is about a 3-hour-a-week job. How is that even possible? Let's do the math. We need to have their housing extended for the full 24 months. And we need to have direct case management for our people, or they are going to fail and be back on the streets of downtown Seattle. That's exactly what's going to happen. We can make it sound as pretty as we want, but the RHA will have failed these people. That's all. That's my only request. As someone who's unemployed from your agency, who came here from Los Angeles to do housing first, I want my clients that I put inside to stay inside. They worked hard, they earned it.
Thank you, Adam. Your 1 minute, 30 seconds has concluded. Next up I have is Jade. Jade, you were given permission to speak. If you want to unmute, test your mic, and then after that, your 1 minute, 30 seconds will begin.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can, Jade.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, board members. My name is Jade and I'm a proud member of the Lived Experience Coalition. Thank you for giving us 90 seconds to speak today, but I am requesting that public comment for all RHA oversight boards be extended to at least 2 minutes, as anything less is insufficient for a substantive argument or statement to be made. During the update later in the agenda, I hope to hear from the board about the severe weather response, specifically in North King County. The RHA severe weather webpage has not been updated since October 30th. The community understands that there were talks about a contract with North King County cities and area providers to staff a severe weather shelter, but we have not heard about any progress. I'm also wondering what the RHAIB is doing to involve the Lived Experience Coalition in staffing for the point in time count and the severe weather response. We have hundreds of members across the region and state with both lived and professional experience, along with connections with the community, which will prove to be vitally helpful in the success of both of these projects. If staffing is an issue for severe weather shelters and point in time count hubs, we have plenty of people to reach out to help between both the Lived Experience Coalition and the recently terminated system advocates who have lived experience, who the RHA is already familiar with. Lastly, I would like the implementation board to speak to how race equity lens is being applied to the point in time count methodology. Thank you.
Thank you, Jade. Next up, and last one I have signed up is Zanita. Zanita, you've been given permission to speak. If you want to unmute, test your mic, then your 1 minute, 30 seconds will begin after that.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Anita McWhorter, former director of the Systems Advocate team. I am here today to also follow up from what Adam was saying, as we did house, hundreds of people, over 300 people in rapid rehousing and permanent private market housing. And as we do know, the right-of-way folks that we housed are getting those extra supports. And we did promise our P4Z clients that they would get that stability that they needed. A minimum of 2 years, as we understand and know, to stabilize, it could take at least 18 months. So the only equitable thing would be to look into our partnership for zero clients also, and make sure that they are afforded those same stability mechanisms as the right-of-way clients, knowing and understand that the systems advocates actually came in to the RHA and to the system to do something different, which was that navigation and stability, not outreach, as we have now contracted out our team and left a minimum of our team there, not even enough to stabilize the clients that we have, as RHA is still trying to work on contracts to stabilize others. So I just want to bring that forward. Thank you.
Thank you. That is all that I have that have signed up for public comment, both virtually and here in the city of Seattle City Hall. With that, Chair, public comment is closed and I hand it back off to you.
Thank you, Austin, and thank you to all our community members who came and gave testimony today. Austin, if you wouldn't mind putting your email address into the chat as a reminder that the public is welcome to put their thoughts down on paper, send them to Austin, and they will get sent to the board.
Will do.
Thank you. Now, board members, public, we have only one more thing on the one more item of business on the agenda this meeting, and that's the point in time count. I want to preface this by saying that we are not voting or approving this process, as that approval has already come from the advisory committee as outlined in the ILA as being a HUD requirement. We are receiving a briefing on the outlining of the PIT count process because of its importance. It's important that we understand and the public understands as well. Also want to thank board member Moritz and the team at KCRHA for reaching out and getting some additional background information from our colleagues at the University of Washington, demonstrating their support for the process, which can be found on the website. under the implementation board meeting scheduled for today. Anyway, Owen, if you want to take it away from me.
Great.
Teach us
Thank
some
you.
math.
Thank you, Chair, and excuse me, the rest of the board for having me here today. One quick correction to something you said, Board Chair Reddy, is that we do not need approval from the advisory committee of voting approval in order to complete the count. We are a delegated authority as the COC collaborative applicant, and our COC charter gives that authority to us. Of course, we are working in deep partnership with our advisory committee and making sure that they, as the board that oversees the COC part of our funding, is kept in deeply informed as we develop this and move forward. We have, however, gotten the approval from HUD for this, and so we are good to go there and moving forward with it, but just wanted to make that clear. And with that, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, that is not sharing the right one. Hold one moment. Someday I'll be able to, use computers appropriately. Okay, I think we are set now. You're seeing a deck that says 2024 Unsheltered Pit. Right. Okay.
Yes.
Right, now I think I have you in the right spot. Apologies for that. Here to talk about the 2024 Unsheltered Pit today with you all. I have quite a bit to go through, and there will be opportunities for a little bit of pick your own adventure today. But before we get into that, I'm going to be really clear that as an agency, we maintain centering this number. 53,532 people experienced homelessness in King County in 2022. While the PIT is an extremely important exercise that we do for an individual snapshot, when we're looking at what we are holding ourselves accountable to as an agency when it comes to ending homelessness, this remains our North Star. So it's always important for us to lead with that, and we'll continuously lead with that, because while this is the largest number we put out, it is also the most accurate number that we know of in terms of the total population of people experiencing homelessness. And I will continue, and we as an agency will continue to center that. Agenda for today, going to go through a little bit of background on the PIT, some stuff that's happened before, provide an overview of what our plan is for 2024, get into some detail of respondent-driven sampling. This is the part where it's choose your own adventure a little bit. I can get as nerdy and in the weeds with math as folks want, or stay high level. Talk about some of the lessons we learned in 2022 when we first used respondent-driven sampling, provide a high-level timeline. We'll go through some of the information about hubs we're currently considering, and then go to next steps. Okay, background. So I believe you all know that the point-in-time count is a requirement from both HUD and from Washington State Commerce. The point-in-time counter PIT aligns with the housing inventory counter HIC to be completed at the same time. And today we're largely going to be, or from here on out, actually, we'll be talking about the unsheltered PIT, which is actually only required every other year. The standard method for that is a street count, but that street count and some other methods are widely understood to be an undercount. I want to recognize that people have been doing the point-in-time count locally long before the KCRHA. Those efforts were actually efforts that helped lead the nation towards understanding how we might come together as a community to better understand the problem of homelessness and talk about it on the large scale that it is. So we're building on work that others have done before. But when we became the system administrators in 2022, the responsibility of completing the PIT came to us. In that year, we also received approval from HUD to use a different methodology for our unsheltered PIT than the traditional one that's been completed here before, which is respondent-driven sampling. In 2022, we were only able to accomplish this in partnership with the Lived Experience Coalition, other folks with lived experience, and researchers from the University of Washington. The street count, which is again the traditional one that's been employed here and is traditionally what's used at other COCs across the country, is an observational count at a night, on a single night. Many of you I know on this call and many in the audience have actually participated in this count in the past, many of you for many years, in fact. This count often gets talked about as a census, but I want to be really clear that it is not a true census. This is a count of people who are visibly unsheltered, not a comprehensive census where there are actually checks and balances in place to ensure that you talk to and engage with every single person who is in a population. And then that visible count is paired with a survey that is deployed after the count in order to get demographic information and other information that's reported to HUD. There's some issues with this, which is what led us to look at a different method, which is that it requires a huge number of volunteers. I think folks talked about previously, and some of the folks calling in talked about staffing for something like this. It requires hundreds of people mobilized and volunteering on the same night. It requires a person that we are including in the count to be visible when we are walking the streets or driving the streets. It separates the survey from the population that we're actually sampling. So that while I do trust the statistics that go into pairing those two things together, when possible, actually having the survey and the sample occur for the same folks is best practice. It uses blanket estimators for tents and vehicles. Of course, when we're going around and doing the street count, we're not going to knock on tents or vehicles to see how many people are in there sleeping at night. And so we use a blanket estimator for all tents and all vehicles, treating them the same. It also doesn't work very well in rural areas, not just because those are areas that are very hard to get through in a slow, methodical way, but many of our rural areas in King County are heavily wooded, where people in those areas tend to sleep if they're sleeping outside. And then again, there's nobody who thinks that this is a fully accurate count. Everybody across the board agrees that this is an undercount. So respondent-driven sampling, which I will again go into much greater detail later, is a sampling method. It's important to note that sampling methods, we are looking at intentionally a small amount of a population in order to create an estimation of overall population. RDS does that same thing. So I want to be clear from the beginning that it is not a requirement for this type of sampling to work, that we are in every part of King County covering all the streets. What we are looking to do in this is to identify key places where we can get some representative samples. Why did we choose this method? It requires fewer locations and fewer volunteers or staff in order to actually operate them. It allows peer recruitment, so engaging hard to reach populations becomes easier. It also allows for folks to choose how they are incorporated into this count. We can directly survey the sample, which I mentioned previously. And then the estimations here, instead of being blanket estimators, are based off of peer connections and participant information. This is also a method that works well in urban, suburban, and rural areas. It's always interesting for me to reflect on the fact that King County is actually geographically mostly a rural county. And so we have to make sure that whatever method we're employing is something that would work well in that area as well. It also has a really well-established method that is used with reputable scientific organizations, including WHO and CDC. So this is a method that has some good research behind its use. Oops. Okay. Overview of 2024. Just want to assure folks that planning is very well underway at this point. We have been working on planning towards the use of this method since June of this year, when we first started engaging HUD about another methods exception. Again, I believe I mentioned this, but we did get that methods exception fully approved. So we are full thumbs up from HUD in the use of this. We'll be using respondent-driven sampling. I cannot emphasize this enough, but we are not doing the qualitative data collection that we did in 2022. We are really focused on utilizing this for the enumeration necessary for the point in time count itself. There's a number of lessons we learned in 2022 that we are trying to implement changes because of here. I'll go through some of those, though not a fully exhaustive list later today. And then we're working in deep partnership with the University of Washington here. I know last time that we worked with the University of Washington, Christopher, was that a hand? Okay, perfect. For some reason, you're the only person that pops up too on my view, so not sure why. When we worked with the University of Washington last time, folks had some questions about what that partnership was. And so I just want to be really clear what we're getting in that partnership and the kind of oversight and review that's going through this work, working with them. We're going to sign a very strict data sharing agreement. Lawyers are talking to lawyers right now about exactly what that will look like to ensure that all client level data is hosted on RHA secure servers. And that for any data that is migrated off of an RHA server for analysis gets deleted, and we have verification of that deletion after the fact. One of the great benefits of working with a research institution is we have access to their institutional review board, or IRB, and we will be putting this methodology through the IRB. That's what that says is we get a stamp of approval that we are ethically doing research with humans. Very important step to complete there. And then we are working actually on eventually publishing this so that other people can have validity in knowing that this is a method that works and that is a method that others could use in their COCs or other areas. And so this will go through peer review of results. That is really the gold standard of getting review of both methodology and results. And I believe will help to solidify people's trust that what we get on the other side of this is accurate. Okay, respondent-driven sampling. So RDS, just want to let folks know, it's both a sampling strategy and a set of statistical estimators. Sampling strategy, people often refer to RDS also as like snowball method, peer recruitment method, things like that. That is how we contact people or how we get people included in our sample. And then the statistical estimator is what is the math behind how we turn that information into the overall estimate of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. A great thing about this is we're able to go from really small sample population to a pretty accurate full population estimate. And as I mentioned previously, the peer-to-peer recruitment really allows us to measure hard to reach populations, people experiencing unsheltered homelessness being a hard to reach population. This has two parts that'll go into the method with which we go through data collection or sampling, and then the data analysis or the statistical estimation. Data collection. So right now our plan is to staff hubs across the county from January 22nd to February 2nd, Monday through Friday of both of those weeks. And most surveys will be completed there. I will give one caveat with this is that, as we know, and as was mentioned previously, our part of the state can have severe weather during that period. If we do have a severe weather during that period, we have already secured approval from HUD to shift this back, as we know that that is not the thing that we need to activate our community on at that time, and also could decrease our ability to get people's participation. So we're moving forward with these as being our dates, but we'll be flexible if need be on that component. Most surveys are going to be completed at those hubs, so people come to those hubs in order to receive that survey. But we start seeds doing street outreach on January 22nd, so that first day. Members of my team are working really diligently with partnering with providers and other folks to identify how we might best do that seeding to make sure that we include a broad amount of subpopulations that we are really making sure that we need to incorporate in this. An example of that is I'm talking with Chief Seattle Club about what it might look like for their outreach team to help do direct seeding for folks that they know are experiencing unsheltered homelessness and are Indigenous, to make sure that we have that fully represented in our count. We're also doing some work with our youth providers to make sure that we're doing seeding appropriately there as well. We provide the first respondent with 3 coupons. These still unclear why somebody way back when decided they're called coupons, but these coupons have information about where to go in order to participate, the kind of incentives that folks would get if they do participate. That respondent gives those to people who they know, also known as Wave 1. Those people come back to a hub with a coupon to be surveyed, and then this begins again. This is a slightly more visual representation of what that looks like. So first interview is happening in the field again. So surveyors partnering with our outreach team, identify a seed participant, complete that survey in the field. One of the key improvements that we've made this year that I'll talk about later is the use of tablets for our data collection rather than pen and paper. It's useful for a number of reasons, not least of which the fact that it helps to maintain security and privacy of that information, so that we don't have to immediately put a paper file into a lockbox in the field. We give coupons to those participants. We ask them to distribute those coupons, and then we provide compensation. Our current plan is to provide people with a gift card of $20 to $25. That amount has not yet been determined. But when we give that person that Visa gift card, there's another part to the compensation that happens after that, which is that seed participant goes and gives those coupons to 3 people that they know. Those coupons have a unique code that ties each of these participants back to that person, so that when that person comes in and participates in a survey, the person who recruited them receives an additional $5 per person that's recruited. So this is another learning we got from our University of Washington partners, is that this allowed for deeper penetration into networks when they tried this in 2023. And so people, again, are getting multiple rounds of compensation. So not just their participation, but recruitment as well. At the wave 1 person comes to the hub, they complete a survey again on tablet with a surveyor. They get coupons. That participant is asked to distribute them. We provide that stage 1 of compensation, and then the seed person receives that stage 2 of compensation. And then it repeats. Wave 1 goes out, talks to people in their network, tries to recruit them in. Those folks come and do an interview with a surveyor, and the process continues. Eventually, we have data that allows us to represent a social network. This is one version of that. We can see that each dot or a node is a person, and then those lines in between show relationships. This shows how you can move from just one seed to a massive amount of people engaged in this work. We saw this when we were doing this in 2022, and based off of what, again, we heard from our partners at the University of Washington for 2023, that additional compensation method helped get more folks to wave 8. This is where things get a little mathy, and I apologize. And Christopher, thank you for your recommendation of working with the comms department on this. I have, and it is still a little mathy. So I'm going to show some equations. I'm going to try to break those down as much as possible. I just want to be as transparent with folks as possible on here about what actually is going into this, and happy to answer questions about it. Also happy to skip around and provide separate briefings on just the math for the people who are deeply interested in the math, but till I hear otherwise, let's kind of go through. These are different ways of looking at social networks. This is what I'm more used to when looking at social networks, so that we're looking not just in a relationship pattern that is from one person to another in a really linear way. We know that that's not how relationships work. People and networks are interrelated. And so this math or this visualization is really what the best experts have come up with in terms of how to visualize that, even though it's a little chaotic. But what you can see here is by that color coding, how one individual gets to more individuals throughout this network. A little bit of vocabulary that's going to be necessary for understanding this math is something called degree. So degree, or little d, is the number of people experiencing homelessness that an individual knows. So that is a representation, or literally a count, of the number of people you're connected to in this visualization. But we also ask people in the questionnaire that we have, we ask some network-based questions. Those network-based questions help us understand how many people they know sleeping in different environments. So we're getting both exactly the number of people that they are connected with through who they recruit, but we also are getting reports of their larger network as well. There's been some really interesting validation research done to show that people are actually very accurate at representing their networks, which makes this much, much better. This is the math part. I'll explain what this means, but there is some math that I won't be able to break down completely, and that's because this is just to be transparent, some pretty complex math. The folks who do this work that we're partnering with have been working in this area in statistics and population level statistics for years. I will do my best to try to break this down a little bit more. But we use something called the Selganic Hackathorn estimator. Somebody asked me the other day if I was just making up words. Promise I am not. But this is an estimator that helps us to get to an understanding of the proportion of the number of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness to the total number of people experiencing homelessness. I'll walk through what each of these different parts of the equation mean, though, so that it becomes a little more accessible. Okay, so NU, this is the total number of people unsheltered. So this is the target of what we're trying to understand, how many people are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. That is a subset of M, which is the total population of people experiencing homelessness. And what is not represented here is NS, which is the total number of people experiencing sheltered homelessness. We do use that in this estimation. It's the fact that we have both our work outside and our work inside that allows us to get to that full number. This is where the symbols get even more fun. So the little line over the D means average. So what this is looking at is the average degree of people in shelters that night. So degree, again, is how many people are connected to other people and getting an average amount across an entire network. DU is looking at this, but for the unsheltered population. We have CSU. So this is looking for the number of cross-social ties between sheltered and unsheltered. What that means is it's the number of people who are sheltered, who have social ties or connections with people who are unsheltered. So it's a way that we are looking at enumerating that. And then CUS is just the reverse of that. How many people who are unsheltered, no people who are sheltered. Again, when we're doing this unsheltered work, we are asking people who they know who are experiencing homelessness across many different locations. That includes shelters. So we don't incorporate that in the unsheltered count, of course, but it's useful information to be able to create these estimators. Now we're getting a little Greek. Mu is just the proportion of people who are unsheltered. So I won't take you through all of the algebra steps here, but essentially when we break down that equation, use it both for, or use it for the unsheltered population, and then we know NS, which is the count of sheltered, we're able to get to this equation. This equation gives us a really solid understanding of how many people are experiencing unsheltered homelessness in that system. Thank you for bearing with me about this, but basically the thing to take away from here is that what this estimator allows us to do is say that if we know the number of people sheltered and the proportion of the total homelessness population that is unsheltered, we can estimate the total number of people living unsheltered. The key part of what we're looking at here is the total homeless population or the proportion of the total homeless population that is unsheltered. That is the piece that Selganic Hackathorn estimator helps us get to. And so by putting together a couple pieces of information, mind you, very advanced statistics, we're able to get to a solid understanding of the total number of people living unsheltered in King County. A little bit more math on this. One of the really excellent things about this type of work and this type of analysis is that we're actually doing this estimation many times. So our researcher friends are going to run those estimates again and again, looking at different cuts of the network. This is where this has actually a lot of power, is because if you remove the seed and the first wave, which are subject to bias of how an individual is recruiting somebody, so how we're planting those seeds, you can remove those from the network. You still see all the other social ties, and you're able to run this again. You're able to run it on subparts of the network. And then the key part here is we're also able to run that with demographic information, including race, ethnicity, gender, veteran status, disability status, all the other things that we are asking for that HUD information. We're able to run this in different cuts in order to allow us to see what those populations are within the overall population. As with all statistical analysis, what we're looking for is convergence on something that we're confident in. The curve to the right kind of shows what that looks like. But what we get to is an estimate that we have 95% confidence in. So saying like in a sampling method, we're saying we're pretty confident that it is right within this range. That is what we get out of this, that helps us to better understand what is that total population with some upper and lower bounds. One of the things that we did hear from folks in 2022 who were like, hey, this is a sampling methodology, we expect to see some upper and lower bounds, and we did not publish those. We will be working on being more transparent about that this year and release those. I'm really excited about this. I get really nerdy about this kind of stuff. 95% confidence interval, again, is also one of the higher level of confidence that you're looking for in order to say statistically and scientifically that the result you're getting is accurate. Okay, I just talked about a lot of RDS methodology and math. I'm going to go next into some lessons learned here, but want to pause to see just in terms of the math or the recruitment methods, if any board members have questions about those two parts of this. Board Member Moretz.
Ben, if you're speaking, you're on mute right now, just FYI.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. Sim, actually a question directed to you. I have some kind of higher level things I'd like to bring up about the pit count. Would you like to do that now, or do you want to continue with the more technical discussion here?
Owen, what are your thoughts? Would you like to?
I would suggest if it's not related to the actual method that we wait for a moment. I have additional pieces that may help to answer some of those questions or provide more context before we get to those larger questions.
Ben, is that okay with you? And we'll make sure that we have time at the end. Okay. Owen, I did have one question for you. That CSU and the CUS, like in terms of sort of the connections and convergence between the two, like how much overlap is there actually between the networks of people experiencing homelessness who are sheltered versus unsheltered?
That is something that I don't know or have the actual figure on the top of my head there. I can do a little bit of investigation if Austin, you might remind me to do this after talking with our partners who actually ran the calculations previously. Okay, moving on. We learned a lot in 2022, got some immediate feedback, including some members of this board. Thank you, Jaja. Finding that some of the hub locations that we were at in 2022 really needed to change and be improved. We are working on identifying locations, particularly in South King County, that are more representative of the overall homelessness population there. And then we're also working on adding an additional rural hub. Thank you, Marvin, for that recommendation as well. Working on citing one that is accessible for folks living unsheltered in rural parts of our community. We think with a couple of those improvements and other improvements about hub locations that we can get greater confidence from folks in making sure, or in the fact that we are actually engaging with a large number of folks that are representative across the community. I do want to remind people with this that we don't need to be in every location or represented in every city in order to actually get a representative sample for this. But we do want to make sure that we are sampling in locations that are representative and also locations that help to provide some confidence here. Because I don't want just to do good science. I want people to fully trust the work that we are doing. So there is a level of public confidence that I'm shooting for there.
I see Ben's hand up. I don't know if that's a question for now or from prior.
Sorry, it was before.
Oh, my apologies.
Thank you. We also knew that staffing demands were greater than we had anticipated. This is a very new method that I think many of you remember. We came together pretty rapidly in 2022. But now that we have some experience using this method and have some time to properly plan, we'll have more robust staffing plans with clearer delineation of roles A lot of this is coming from direct input from folks who supported this previously that we captured in 2022, some work from our partners at the University of Washington who tried this out again in 2023. And I'm very, very excited to not go through the same kind of chaos as we did in 2022. I mentioned this previously, we're going to better leverage technology rather than using paper forms. One of the things that folks who participated in this in 2022 will remember is you had to like manually identify a code for somebody based off of a code that came in and write it all on paper on a new coupon every time they came through. It worked, but oh my gosh, was that confusing and chaotic. I apologize to people that I subjected to that, but we're going to actually have some on-site printers for printing off QR codes that will help to do that. A thing that's really exciting about that is we can do some data validation as it's coming in, because we'll be able to digitally collect this information rather than having to take paper forms that we then take to a central location and do post data collection, data entry. So it should streamline the process quite a bit, as well as making it more secure. We also know that there was not enough training for interviewers in 2022. Still extraordinarily impressed by folks that we had deployed in the field doing this work with a minimal amount of training. But we're going to work on upping that for 2022 or for 2024, looking both at an increase in quantity and quality of training. And there's going to be in contact with folks who helped staff hubs to figure out what gaps we had in training that we might be able to address. We'll get into that in a moment, but we will be moving towards some of that planning shortly. Some additional lessons learned. One of the biggest issues that came up with talking with some of our Native providers is that our American Indian Alaska Native community was underrepresented. This, in getting into some deep conversation with some folks at Chief Seattle Club, is not necessarily about how we did recruitment, but how we asked people to identify their race. So it's how we asked that question. And so I'm in collaboration with folks from Chief Seattle Club who are being very generous to me with their time in order to give some advice on how we might ask that question better. That is also in alignment with our requirements from HUD. We also know that families with children were underrepresented. We are looking at an additional innovation this time, looking at piloting a phone-based hub for families with children. And we will be partnering with Mary's Place's intake line in order to do that. Really excited about this. Janelle and I toured with some folks from Mary's Place, including oh my gosh, committee member Tillman from Mary's Place for the advisory committee last week, and I'm really excited about this partnership. We're doing this really just specifically for families. This has come up a couple times of why don't you do this for more populations? This is the first time that we're doing a phone-based one, and based off of what we learned in 2022 about biting off more than we need to at any given moment, we're really going to focus on doing this just for one population and doing it well, and centering on a population that particularly has difficulty to get to a physical hub during the day. Another component that we're looking at with this that allows us for that differentiation is we are planning on providing heightened incentives for families with children. So looking at providing greater or not greater quantity, gift cards that are closer to $40 or $50 rather than 20 or 25, knowing that families have greater needs that they need to meet. We also dramatically undercommunicated about the new methodology last year, which is why you are being subjected to too much math from me today, and will probably continue to be. And so we're trying to get out in front of people early, include more detail, again, help to build the public confidence in this work. That will also include more reporting that comes out on the other side of it so that people can see what did we learn from this, and have a better understanding of what we know about our unsheltered community on the other side of this. We also, and I don't know if I could ever say this enough, but we found out that pairing the point in time count and qualitative data collection was difficult just from a logistical standpoint. That level of qualitative data collection in that short of a period of time, regardless of the recruitment methodology, would be very difficult. And so what we're working on doing is just focusing on the point in time count this year and only gathering that data to do this extremely well. We'll say that those are just 8 lessons learned from this. We have many more lessons learned, but those are ones that I really wanted to highlight for you all in the public today. Timeline. So we're in November. We are working on finalizing our hub locations right now, finalizing that methodology and staffing plan. When I say finalizing methodology, I just want to be clear, it's about the implementation of the methodology, not making changes to how we're doing it in general. And then we will, of course, submit that final methodology to our advisory board. Again, as that COC oversight board, we want to make sure that we keep them keenly aware. We'll submit that to you all as well. And then we'll be in volunteer recruitment. So very soon we'll be looking at how can we get people committed to working in these hubs. We really want to focus on folks who know the communities that we're physically going to be in, because we know that relationships matter. So people who are in those communities know the people experiencing homelessness there, whether they have previously experienced homelessness themselves, are a provider or a community member that deeply engages. We'll have a mix of folks at hubs from that recruitment that I talked about from King County's Regional Homelessness Authority, and then some researchers from the University of Washington, so that we can have a good mix of folks working together. December is going to be continuing on those efforts, working on logistics, supplies, and trainings, and doing a lot of the back end pieces that you won't see a whole lot of, but I will do my best to keep you informed during that time. And then January is really our month to shine. We'll get all of our logistics and supplies finalized. We want to complete all volunteer training by the 12th, so that when we are ready to go on January 22nd in the field, we're ready to go. 2 weeks of data collection there. Again, if we do have a severe weather event, we will look at moving that back some, and are working on with our severe weather team here about what that would look like and what indicators would tell us to move back. And then after data collection ends on the 22nd, we're going to take a short break to catch our breath before moving immediately into data validation and analysis. Again, because we do those many different cuts of the data in order to make sure that we're doing it by all the different demographic information and getting towards removing bias where we're able to in the sample. It's going to take a minute to actually get to a final data analysis, hoping that to complete that on March 15th, which gives us a month and a half before we anticipate submitting to HUD. I don't believe that they have identified when they need the final submission yet, but it's usually around the end of April. Hub considerations. One thing I know people are really excited about and really want to know is where might we go? Apologies to our advisory committee. Last time I went, I know that Alex sent out a correction, but I shared the wrong hubs in our meeting. The hubs that I'm going to share today help to correct for some of the comments that you all were actually giving to me. So we'll share those in a moment. But when we're identifying hubs, we're doing engagement with folks across King County in order to identify where to go. Vehicle Residency Working Group. So thank you, Bill Kerman Hackett, who I voiced his concern earlier, trying to work with you all in order to make sure that we not only have locations that are accessible for vehicle residents, but that we're doing seating into folks who are living in vehicles. We're working with Seattle King County Coalition on Homelessness, or SCITCH, who has done this count for many years in the past, and learning a lot from them. As I mentioned previously, we're working with Chief Seattle Club, our sub-regional planning team, always excellent at helping to make sure that we're talking with folks across the county, not just being Seattle specific. I believe next week we're talking with Volt, or the Veteran Operation Leadership Team. I mentioned a collaboration with Mary's Place earlier, and then members of my team have been meeting with a number of different youth providers in order to get input on this. Hub considerations. We basically want to assure people that we're really looking for some specific things in order to identify a hub that will work. Again, we're looking for a total of probably 10, maximum 12, but we'll remind folks that 10 is sufficient in order to get across the whole region. And we're looking for places that we think that respondents can get to and are accessible, not just to overall people, but also for different subpopulations we're working with. And we're looking for places that folks can come inside. We know January is a little cold, has accessible bathrooms, and key to some of this is also have internet or good hotspot reception. Okay, now for the mappy part of this. This is a representation of where The RHA completed this in 2022, which are the little red diamonds. And then 2023, when our University of Washington partners were working on this method where they went to. So we got to learn a lot from not only the locations we chose, but also the locations that they chose as well. Through those 2 years is how we got to that list before of what an ideal hub looks like. You'll notice here that there are some areas that don't get covered. And so we are looking, while I don't have a map, we are looking at helping to spread out our hubs just a little bit more in order to have a larger geographic coverage. So again, to give people more trust that we're hitting all the different parts of the counties. Right now, these are the hubs in consideration. This is not the final list. We're working with folks to help narrow these down, but are in conversations with folks at different locations about what it might look like in order to use that as a hub. I won't go through all of these now, but I will highlight just a couple pieces. One is the Southeast King County component. We heard loud and clear from folks that we did not have representation there previously. So we're working with Maple Valley Food Bank in order to get into that area. We also heard again in South King County that we likely were not in the correct locations there. Came loud and clear from folks. Day one, I think Jaja said, why aren't we in Federal Way or Kent? So we are looking at getting into Federal Way in Kent. And looking at Arcadia as well to ensure that we have not just seating for youth, but a very accessible location for youth to go to. And then next steps for this, we're working on finalizing hubs. My team is meeting with people pretty much every day this week and into next week in order to finalize those hubs. As soon as that is finished, we can really get to the detailed implementation and the methodology and staffing plan. One thing I will lift up here is that HUD is actually encouraging us to look at shortening the amount of time we're at hubs. And we do have evidence that we can actually collect enough information in as little as 3 days in some areas. And so we may be looking at some of the hubs being open for a shorter period of time rather than those full 10 days. And so we'll get into the details of what that will look like. We'll create those specialized staffing plans, continue community engagement, answering folks' questions about this. And then, of course, going to recruiting for hub staffing. This is where we'll start reaching out to folks in order to figure out who we can get to be in those locations for 10 days. And then all the less exciting back-end logistics like printers. With that, I'm happy to open it up for questions from the board.
Oh, and thank you so much for the overview. Ben, if you're available, why don't we start with your question?
Sure, thank you. So I've quite a bit to say on this topic. By way of preface, I'll just note that I happen to have a, firstly, let me say thank you to Owen for this presentation and to the time to walk me through a few months and your willingness to be open to discussing all of these things. I very much appreciate that. I've had a lot of questions in part because of my background. I happen to have an advanced degree in statistics, and in particular, my focus area was in graph theory, which is the kind of the broader subtopic under which RDS and things like that fall. But my interest here is really one in that's related to the overall strategy and direction of the RHA and our homelessness response and how this topic fits into that. And so I want to make 3 points. One is, why this is important, why we have to focus on this in the way we do. Secondly is just briefly a touch on the suitability of the RDS approach for what we're doing here. And then thirdly, how we want to incorporate the results of this into our strategy and operations going forward in the context of our 5-year plan. So firstly, why this is important is, I think, because of the one specific goal we have in our 5-year plan, which is to bring everybody inside. That's our goal. We've went through a tremendous amount of effort to get to that degree of strategic clarity, which is, I think, laudable and required a lot of consensus building. And this number that we're measuring here, the number of unsheltered people in our region in January, has to be our yardstick. Our goal, if we're successful, is going to be to bring that number down to 0. And so I think this is a very important statistic for us. I disagree vehemently with what Owen, what you said respectfully and vehemently about the 55,000 number being our goal. That's the number of people who experience homelessness in a given year, not the number of people who are homeless at a certain point in time. We are talking about the difference between a stock and a flow. I think our goal needs to be the stock. We have to be reducing that number to 0. And the difference between those two numbers is great when you look at it from a strategic perspective. You know, the broader number of people who experience homelessness experience in different ways. Many of those people are never literally homeless. They are able to oftentimes cure their own homelessness without intervention, but the people who are literally homeless, the people who are outside, are the ones where we need to focus our resources. They're the people who need the most help. They're the group that is of most concern to the voters of our region, to the funders of our organization. And I think we have to maintain a laser focus on that population, bringing those people inside. And there's many, many things we should discuss about how to do that. A lot of that is laid out in our plans. I'm sure it'll be the focus of future plans, but unless we can measure that accurately, we will never know whether we're actually making progress on our goals. And you can't manage what you can't measure. So this is a really, really important thing for all of us to dig into and understand. How can we make this our gold standard measurement that we check in on as often as possible to make sure we're really focused on every action making a dent in this number. Secondly, RDS is an interesting approach. It is novel. It is very complicated. It is hard for people to understand. I think it is fine, broadly speaking. You know, I very much appreciate the letter that came from the University of Washington, which I encourage everybody to read. I also very much appreciated the various academic papers that were referenced in the footnotes, which I don't know that I would recommend for everybody to read. But it's clearly a good approach for measuring a population where both the visible, measurable people are hard to find, and it's difficult to estimate a ratio from those who are easy to find to those who are hard to find. There are other approaches. You know, for example, we could do a census approach and then use some approximations to think about how many people we can't find. That's, for example, is how the United States Census works. They don't measure everybody in with the long form, they measure some and they do extrapolations. So we could do it different ways. I think RDS is one way to do it. I don't have a particularly strong point of view whether it's the best way to do it or not. You know, we talked a lot about how it's academically being studied now. I think it's important for us to remember that this is not an academic study that we're doing. This is a really critical public interest government statistic that we're trying to build here, that we need to make sure the public has confidence in it. So simplicity and ease of use and ease of understanding, I think, is quite critical. But I'm supportive of this, and this is the direction we're going, in particular because it's what we did last year. And to my third point, whatever we do here has to be consistent with what we've done in the past so that we can show whether or not we're making progress. So I was very frustrated last year when we released these numbers with very little explanation about them, in particular because it showed an increase in homelessness between the year prior and this year, between 2020 and 2022. But we did not show whether or not that increase in the statistic was due to a change in measurement approach versus a change in the actual incidence of unsheltered homelessness. And when you dig into the white papers that you sent, it's actually pretty clear that most of the change was due to a change in the measuring statistic. So we didn't communicate that at all, which I think did all of us a disservice because it showed, it made it look like homelessness was changing in a way that it was not. So I do think that going forward, we have to be very, very clear in our communications that there's a change in approach, both from 2020 to 2022. And then now what we're describing here in 2024 is a meaningful change from what we did in 2022. So we have to be clear about that. And I do think, as was seen in the white papers, we can estimate the impact of that change in measurement and allow ourselves to produce a truly longitudinal, consistent data set that we can at least look to see whether we're moving in the right direction or not. So I think, you know, one of my main requests for all of this was just to make sure that we are doing what we're doing now, which is having a full and public discussion of this approach so that we can understand it. And the data that was published on 2022 is very helpful. I wish we would have done that sooner. I assume that we'll do the same thing for 2024 and we'll have a lot more transparency. And I would very much like to ask that we consider doing this on an annual basis. I think measuring our success even once a year is too infrequent. We have to find a way to get more detailed, and I would like to go back to doing an annual pick count, even if it's regardless of the solution, and to try to make it as consistent as possible so that we can show progress or not. And I think as an implementation board, we need to have a really deep strategic discussion about what our goal is. Is our goal to reduce the number of people experiencing homelessness or the number of people who are homeless? And that sounds like a semantic difference, but it really, I think, does imply a series of really important strategic choices that we should be making. And I personally feel that it's this pick count number that we need to focus on. And so I appreciate everybody digging in on this one and really understanding what that number is. So that wasn't so much of a question as it is a small speech. I apologize for that, but thank you again for the opportunity to really dig into this.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate that. Jaja, I see that your hand is up.
Yeah, actually, somehow my hand is up for you because Ben made reference to information from UW and some other paperwork that I am not privy to, and I was wondering if I could get that information so that I too can be informed.
Gotcha. Jaja, let's I think it was sent out with the board packet, and let's double check that you got that. If not, Austin, regardless, Austin, can you make sure to resend that letter out?
Yes, I'll make sure it gets to you, Jaja. Also, for the public, the letter is on the implementation board meeting website as well.
Thanks, Jaja, for bringing that up. Christopher, I saw that your hand was up for a moment. You're on mute.
Yeah. I was also going to mention, Jaja, I think it's in the footnotes. So the letter itself had the information, but then the footnotes also, there was some links to it that go a layer deeper, but it's all in there. You just have to dig for it.
Thank you. I did not get that
Okay.
information, but yeah, Austin will make sure. Thank you so much. And thanks, Christopher. I'll look.
Other questions from board members? Oh, and I actually have a comment and a question. On the comment front, I want to also point out how grateful I've been to you and sort of talking to me about this. I've had a lot of questions about it over the months, and I'm certainly not nearly as skilled as Ben or others in this. And so I appreciate the remediation and getting me up to speed. And as I've learned more about this approach, I've become much more comfortable with it, and it seems to make a lot of sense to me, given our and may become like a more standardized approach generally for the homelessness counts. And I imagine HUD is going to be watching this pretty carefully. I also, agreed to some extent with Ben around this question of like what is the number that we think about and what's the number that we focus on, and that administrative data, like how many people experience homelessness over a year, I think is really important for us. But the other part that like the sort of difference between incidence and prevalence, like how many people are homeless now, like tonight versus over the course of a year, is dependent not just on the number of people who experience homelessness, but like the duration of homelessness. And I think the thing that we as RHA have the tightest control over is that duration of homelessness. Like the number of people who become homeless is, to some degree out of our hands because of the affordable housing market. And thinking about how long people experience homelessness is, I think, really important. It's also really important to have actionable numbers, right? And the administrative data, even though it has some deficits to it, is also easier to track over time. And so that we can update month to month over the course of a year and like really dig into like where we're making a difference, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, Owen. Anyway, so I've been really grateful for all the work that your team's put into this. a question though was on the survey that comes out, even though it's not qualitative, I wanted to make sure, are there going to be questions that are related to not just demographics, but things like your duration of homelessness, any health related information, like have you been to the ER or the hospital in the last several months, et cetera? And are there any questions related to system feedback, like do you know where to go to get shelter, that kind of thing?
Thanks for that. No, just to be very blunt, we are really laser focused on doing this really well with the HUD requirements. We are planning on adding a couple additional questions, but are really trying to keep this shorter. I'm open to have some offline conversations with folks about like what those might be, what might be helpful, but my filter for this is really, if we add another question, it has to be actionable. So are we getting information that is going to help us change the way we deliver services in the next month or two? Are we going to change the way that we might bid the dollars out the door? I'm really interested in knowing where we can collect information that is going to drive change in our system as quickly as possible. And because of that, I'm trying to filter down to just a few areas. Talking with a number of different partners about what that might look like. One of the ones, again, Chief Seattle Club, working with them to see if there are things that we need to know specifically about our Native population and highlight up to figure out how do we not just silo folks experiencing homelessness who are Indigenous to Indigenous providers, but improve the system across the board for them tomorrow.
Thanks, Owen. I saw Shaja's hand up for a moment.
I was just gonna make a comment and thank Owen for his presentation. And because I was part of the 2022, I wanted to thank him for implementing, or at least taking into consideration what we went through in the comments that were made, and that you have implemented them in the slide as far as making those changes. I appreciate that. And I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I think it's important that, yes, to what Ben said, but also that number, 53,000 people homeless. I wish that we can figure out how to take that number and as we did in the Housing Command Center in Partnership for Zero, bring it down. You know what I mean? And I mean, because you did with the statistics, you showed, or actually not statistics, but with the data, you showed that we started out with this number and that number started moving down. And I wish that we at the implementation board can see that number move down or up, but I prefer down.
Thank you. If folks don't have any other questions, I want to make sure you all know that I am available. As Simha mentioned, we have talked about this many times. I've met with Ben as well. Happy to sit down with any of you all as board members to answer additional questions, go through any of the materials that have been sent out, etc. Thank you for allowing me time to come here. I'm really excited about being well ahead of where we were in 2022.
Thank you, Owen. And seeing no other questions, I'd like to, we are now at 3:30 at the end of our meeting, scheduled meeting time. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
It's
A
John,
motion
I'll
we
move
adjourn.
to it.
And
I'll
I'll
second.
second it.
Okay.
All right, I hear a second, and I hear a motion. I hear a second. Thank you, both. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Sorry, any opposed? All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you to all our board members, community members, to Owen and Helen. The next meeting, the implementation board, will be held on December 13th. And we will announce the physical meeting location on the KCRHA website as soon as possible. All right, thank you to everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Have a good
Owen.
evening.
Oh,
Christopher
and you
has-
hit it out of the park. Thank you for that. That was a lot of technical information to give, and you made it digestible and understandable. And for the first time, I don't hate algebra anymore.
Oh my gosh, what a compliment. Thank you.
Well,
Christopher.
I still don't love it, but you made it a
I'll
lot more.
take not hating. I'll take not hating.
Anyway, thank you for all of that effort. I'm sure that took a lot of time to put that together, so thank you.
Of course.
And
Thanks,
thanks for
Al.
taking all this feedback from Ben, from myself, from board members, from the community, from Jaja.
Yeah.
Like that responsiveness is really appreciated.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Have a good